Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. So nice to see you all, the regulars and some newcomers today. And we are here doing Success Sadhana. It's a program and it's hosted by our leader, veteran Bhakti Yogi, author, and former monk, Vaish. He's with us. And the topic for today is Be a Leader. Welcome to the show, Vaish.
Great to see you, Pavani. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for keeping the shop open for us.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And we are so grateful that you're here today.
Thank you very much. I see Montalgo. I see Charles. That's good news. Manu's here. Fantastic. Jason, thank you for coming. JM's robot is here, unless that's him behind the scenes. Rajiv, fantastic. SG, thanks for being here as usual. SI, is that a real person or a robot? Alekis, Anoop, Sire, Mayank, fantastic. I'll see you later. And we have Manish Mukharavinda, the one and only, and C. Solano. Thanks everyone for being here today. As we enter into this next few minutes of discussion, it would be helpful to start with a little introspection, meditation, and bring ourselves to a center point. So I'm going to start with a drone in C, middle C. I find it to be compatible. The harmonies in our lives resonate with levels of consciousness. Music is a universal language. And just having a drone in the background, I feel is very helpful. So I'm going to start the drone as others come into the room here. I think they'll know the drill. And we're going to try to drill down into a deeper level of our consciousness. So right now I'm turning original sound for musicians on, and here comes the drone. Welcome everyone to Success Sadhana. Our real success comes from practicing looking at our eternal situation within this body and seeing that we're different from the body. The ancient wisdom literatures talk about how fear arises when we forget who we are. Bhayam means fear. And forgetting who we are is called dvitiya. Dvi means two. It means we see something separate than our unity with our original source. That illusory conception leads us to absorption in many things that are not helpful for us. So let's take a moment to get oriented towards our consciousness. We are units of consciousness. The ancient wisdom literatures say we're chit kana. Chit means conscious entities or fragments of consciousness, just like there are rays that come from the sun, which we could also call fragments of the sun. It's the same quality as the sun, and we're part of that sun. And when we realize our connection to that sun, then we feel whole. And similarly, when we feel connection with our source, that is called abhigna and swarat, fully conscious, fully independent, then we also feel aligned, we feel happy, and we realize our potential. So let's try closing our eyes if you wish. It's all voluntary, of course. And try sitting up a little straighter than you were a second ago, and bring your awareness to your breath and practice 4-4 breathing. 4 counts out, 4 counts in, and establish a pattern. counting exhalation in 4 counts, and inhalation in 4 counts. And relax. Let go of any turbulence that's passing through your mind. Right now, you don't have to do anything except be aware. That should be a relief. We're not human doings, we're human beings. So let's just be for a moment and observe what's going on. Take a look at your breath. Notice that it's automatic. You don't have to think about it that much. It is going on. So are all the other functions in your miraculous biomechanical robot that you live in called the human body. It's got everything you need to look deeply within yourself and to see the connection of everything in the world to our divine source. And now to notice our free will. Transfer your attention from your breath to your right hand and just feel your right hand right now. You're in the moment, experiencing that you're in a body, you have a hand that's illuminated by your own consciousness. Transfer that same awareness, your awareness, which you have free will to direct in any way you like, to your navel. And move up a few inches to the left to your heart and notice that it's going on as if directed by a higher power. And move up a little higher to your voice box. And just notice that you have an apparatus through which you can express yourself. You think it, then you say it. It comes out in words. And now bring your attention to thought energy. It's material, but it's very subtle. Step back in your mind and be an observer. Desires, plans, emotions. They come like turbulence on the ocean. Sometimes the mind is calm, other times it's stormy. But you're the observer. As it comes and goes, you're separate from your mind. What are you? You're the consciousness within this body. It's always alive, whereas the body is never alive. It's only animated by us. And now to solidify any realizations we have, let's try mantra meditation to introduce transcendental sound to the experience. I'll repeat the mantra, Nitai Gauranga. 5 syllables. I'll do it 3 times. If you'd like, you can follow along behind muted mics. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga. Just take a moment to experience how the sound vibration affects you. Stay in your constitutional position as the observer of the mind and the body. The body is a field, you're the knower of the field. And with deep gratitude for this gift, the human body, which is like a boat that can take us across the ocean of material suffering. Bring your awareness back to your breath. Try rubbing your fingers together, then rub your hands. Wiggle your toes. Slowly open your eyes and come back into the room. And welcome back. Thanks for going along on that short inward journey. The ancient wisdom literatures are called nigama, which means, gama means to go. It comes from the word gach in Sanskrit, gachati, to go somewhere. And ni means within. You can take a journey within. So why is this important? Because whatever we do in this world, however we interact with the world, depends on our balance. Inwardly, when we feel balanced, nourished, satisfied, then we interact with others with compassion and with dexterity. When we ourselves are out of balance, well, you can tell me, how is it when you don't feel balanced and you deal with somebody, even somebody you love? Is it possible to do so without thoughtfulness? Pavani's kind of giving a little nod. Charles, I can't tell. Yeah, he's got his. Everybody else, I can't see you. So you can always use the chat box. Nod. Okay, thanks, Nicholas. Leadership. Let's look at the big board now, talking about this topic of leadership. Be a leader. Then we'll go into who is a leader. So I'm giving the definition of a leader as anyone who has influence on another. Who here has influence on anyone else in their lives? Let's see. You could raise your hand there. Okay, I got Charles, I got Mukar Vinda. Oh, there's Mayank, Radhakripa. Anybody else, you can put an emoji if you don't want to turn your screen on. Come on, I need a few more emojis. I'm looking, I'm scrolling. Hey, thanks, Chunky. Who else? SG, Jayanti's got a lot going on there. Okay, we have influence on people more than we think. In fact, I heard of a study, someone giving a lecture recently who said that an average person who's not in a position of authority, governmental authority, or in a corporation has an influence over at least 10,000 people in their lives. If you want the exact study, I'll have to come back to you because I didn't get the exact citation. I just heard it from somebody that I trust. It stands to reason, however, we influence people more than we think. There was a movie many years ago called It's a Wonderful Life about a person who thought that he was useless to the world, and then an angel came and showed him what the world would have looked like if he hadn't been born. And then he saw that each one of us, even if we're seemingly in an insignificant situation, have influence on others. And more people than we think are observing us and following us. But to speak if we demonstratively take up a leadership role. And the ancient wisdom literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, says anybody who's in the position of being a parent or a teacher or a spiritual leader, a community leader, should be aware of what real leadership is and also where their power to lead comes from. So influence, we have influence because we're alive and what we do makes a difference. So the wisdom literatures talk about that fulcrum of power for leadership is that first and foremost, the person leads him or herself. And where does this come from? Well, several places. One is from a book called the Upadeshamrita, which was written 550 years ago. And it's by a sage scholar named Rupa Goswami. And he wrote this book to give a simple approach to one who wants to have a spiritual practice. And the first verse in his primer says, Vacho vegam, manasa kroda vegam, jihva vegam, udarapasta vegam, etan vegam, yo vishaheta dhira, sarvamapi mam pritivim nasishyat. Very interesting choice of Sanskrit words. He says that all yoga begins with controlling the senses. Then he says, if you are able to control your own senses, then you become a teacher for everyone else who can't, which pritivim nasishyat means pretty much everybody in the world. Most people don't take time to work on themselves. They chase after desires. They think about positioning themselves so that they can be comfortable or enjoy life in different ways. But Rupa Goswami says that real leadership, what to speak of happiness, comes from us. The leadership means that we've taken the time and done our due diligence to learn how to control our senses, which comes from regulation of the senses. If we let them go and do whatever they want, then after a while, they feel entitled. Have you ever noticed that if your senses feel entitlement? For instance, if you see your favorite dessert sitting there, and then your tongue may say, I'm entitled to that. And then perhaps that's not what you had planned because you were aware of the fact that your diet matters in your overall health. So then you say, no, sorry, we're not having that now. We'll have something else. So there's a way in which he says, vacha vegam, the first thing, there's an urge of the tongue to speak, say anything and everything. Manasakrota vegam, then it goes to the mind, tongue, belly, genitals. There's a direct line, all the senses are in a line. And if one sense is out of control, then the other ones tend to follow suit, especially the tongue. So this is something that comes up also in the Yoga Sutras. If anybody's aware of Patanjali Muni's book on meditation, which is considered a standard, he starts with the yamas and niyamas. That's ways that you can adjust your lifestyle so that it is moral, ethical, and the way you treat yourself is the way you treat other people. Hopefully you treat yourself well. And there are ways in which you have to be clean, nonviolent, because he says for instance, if you steal from others or you cheat or lie, then when you try to meditate, your mind's going to be disturbed because you're generally thinking about how to make up for whatever lies you told, or if you steal from somebody. And so this is universal. It's well known. So there are different levels of leaders. Some people follow leaders out of fear. If you ever study history, you'll see there's kings like Ozymandias. There's a poem by Shelley talking about how he had a huge statue of himself made in front of his kingdom, and on it is the inscription that people should shiver when they see him because of his power to vanquish anyone who doesn't agree with him. So some people rule by fear. That's possible, right? It's possible. Then there's a way of prospect. People rule by prospect. What are you going to get from me? I'm going to pay you. I'm not going to pay you. For instance, many of us here on the show today may work, right? Work for a boss somewhere? Not necessarily, because if your boss says, you can come in and work, we're just not going to pay you, you probably won't come in. So we don't really work for the boss or the company. We work because they're paying us, right? And we see that in athletics. Everyone's rooting for a uniform, but the players themselves, like, oh no, sorry, can't play for you anymore because you're not paying me enough. They go somewhere else, right? This goes on the level of prospect. People, uh, they follow a leader who pays them, or they're a leader because they're paying people. And then there comes the level of leadership where people invoke people's sense of duty. And sometimes we see that people will die for a certain cause because there's a leader, political, social leader, or reformer, and people line up and they'll say, yes, I'll die for this cause. And they follow the leader. And then the highest level of leadership is those who invoke love. Uh, my teacher used to say that if you can run an organization in which there's love and trust, that's the gold standard. If people are working because they love you and they trust you as a leader, you can't break their determination. In fact, there's a story about a monk named Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there's a true story. He was over 500 years ago. He was teaching about this system of bhakti yoga. And he had so many followers. People, when they saw him, were so enlivened. And they'd follow him in throngs, tens of thousands of people. And a local king, when he came through Bengal, when the monk Chaitanya came through Bengal, the local king there, who was an emperor, he was very powerful, and he ruled by fear. People were afraid if they didn't follow him, he'd kill them. And he saw this Chaitanya and all his followers, and he made a note to one of his advisors. He said, you see, this person is the most extraordinary because people follow him not for prospect of what they're going to, if they're going to make money or not out of fear, but out of love. He said, as for me, and it was a moment of candor, he said, people follow me because if they don't, then they'll be punished. He said, so he's a greater person than I am. And so these levels of leadership and motivation are significant. And where does it begin? Where does the example begin? A true leader is first a self-leader. If we can't lead ourselves, that is, control our senses and be regulated, then it's very difficult to give moral instruction. So then we find that leadership crises are caused by so-called leaders who have not learned to lead themselves, meaning They don't have any self-control. And although they lead by fear or by prospect, people follow them, but it's short-lived because as soon as that person has some lapse or they lose power, then people will not follow them. And the leadership is not effective based on the lower levels of motivation for following such a leader. So I'm going to tell a story in just a second, not yet, but I want to get your feedback since I've been talking for a while now and get some human interaction going, even through this Zoom medium. We can feel like we're together somewhere in someone's living room and we're having a conversation. Love to hear any reflections you have so far in anything I've said or shown or the meditation that we have. I'll count down from 5 and just either raise your hand and you can speak up or just speak up, or you can put something in the chat box. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah, I love the idea of learning to first lead yourself before, going out and leading others, and also that just naturally, people might want to follow someone who has exhibited that, because yeah, it can be very hard for people. Like you said, the senses are tempting, and going off course and doing things that maybe aren't the best for us is very tempting, and so when someone can do that very consistently, people notice and want to follow that. And I think it is then very helpful to other people. So yeah, I really, really like that idea. First leading yourself.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, I agree with you. And it's the real sense of being an influencer. I mean, there's ways you can talk about what to do, what not to do, but if people see that you're doing what you say should be eschewed and they notice that you walk your talk, as they say, then they naturally become inspired. And there's a way in which if people see that you're speaking about something that you don't follow yourself, they don't take it seriously anyway, right? And it's hard to take ourselves seriously if we don't. Or I'll say it in the positive sense that if we're following what we know is the right thing to do, then we lack what most people have, and that is, or we're freed, I should say, from what most people have, which is cognitive dissonance. It's a torturous situation to know what the right thing is and then not be doing it. Because then we have this sense of not being real leaders. Feel that why should anybody follow me because I'm not actually doing what I say is the right thing to do and so forth. Yeah, and at least Alicia, okay. How do I say your name? I'm sorry. Elaine. Thanks, Elaine. Elaine said, I second that. Okay, Arvind and Minal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I liked what you said about if you're able to control your own senses, then you have the ability to become a leader for everyone else.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the urge of controlling your tongue and what you say, because that's something which you can't take back as well. Once you've said it, it's out in the open. So just having a bit of control with that.
Yeah, it's the first noticeable trait of a person, what they say. Because somebody can be well dressed and look like a civilized person, but then if something crass comes out of their mouth or inconsiderate, then we know that's what's in their heart. And it's hard to restrain one's tongue and not say inconsiderate things if we're in disarray inwardly. So the practice always shows itself, our practice always shows itself externally in the world And it's quite amazing when someone is actually tolerant. And we see tolerance in the face of provocation. We take notice because, especially nowadays, it seems to be a trend to become intolerant and vociferously defend one's position, which I'm not saying is necessarily a bad thing, but it's the way that we do it and the way the speech comes out. It's noticeable. Yeah, thank you very much, Mino. Very helpful. Okay, anyone else? We'll take one more for the trifecta. Nicholas has a green arrow, and I'm not sure if that means he wants to say something. Green arrow's gone. Anyone else? Reflection. Anything we've talked about so far? The meditation. Wow, look, we've got Radhakripa.
Yeah, I think it's very inspiring when we observe the people who what they speak and what they do. When we see that thing very consistent in their behavior, it's very natural tendency. I observe that to follow that person. It's theoretically on the books. I mean, I remember when in the schools it is, there's the slogans written on all the walls, right? Honesty is the best policy, all those nice things. But then there's a cheating happening in the school when the exam is happening, right? So it's directly contradicts what is written down there. But once we see a person in person from any sphere, it's very inspiring that you also wanted to be like that and follow that. So I think the true leaders to me is, follow what they do, what they speak. Everything is aligned. And that makes me feel I also wanted to follow a little bit of that.
Such a good point. It seems so subtle, and some people might think even old-fashioned or maybe cliche. Honesty is the best policy. But these are very high-minded principles. Junkie.
Um, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I specifically liked that example that you brought off of fear. You said that some people in history, we have a lot of examples where leadership was ruling by fear. I feel like, growing up, we don't have a lot of good examples in front of us. Like that whole fear is used in classrooms, it's used in so many places, even at work. And I think it's sort of like reprogramming our brain to say that's not a good example to follow. So I really like that, you put like you mentioned that history. We have to learn from history.
Yeah, that's very helpful to see that those, as Radhakripa said, that honesty is the best policy. You may think it's expedient, but later on, one's ruined by the transgression of these high-minded principles, of ethical principles, and so on.
Yeah.
Yes, and being observant of what is the motivation makes a big difference. Pavani, we have a couple from Nirali and Nicholas. Do you want to read those?
Yeah, I see from Nirali, she says one disadvantage is that now people expect you to follow ethics and tell about you, but not themselves, or plan to follow in return. How do you handle no reciprocation?
How do we handle no reciprocation? Well, we have to be selective. One of our superpowers, or our main superpower, is free will. And the more selective we are about our association, who we actually take into our confidence and in who we listen to deeply, we should be very careful about, very selective. Meanwhile, if you have to work with people, you have to be in a situation where you're working for somebody who's not ethical, and that's temporary situation, the temporary situation you're in now, you have to tolerate it and just notice it. By having these discussions, we can be more mindful of how we're interacting with certain types of people. So we're not obligated to that. And what the Srimad Bhagavatam says is when you're working with somebody who you don't feel has the highest level of consciousness, yet you're obligated to, your reciprocation with them is yes, sir, yes, ma'am, thank you very much, uh, and do your duty and move on. Because in some cases, that's your obligation. You can't question every single thing that comes up to people's face because of the realities of the world. So you have to tolerate at some point, even as you know what the higher principle is. And the second one,
And Nicholas says a lot of people want to help others and do so by force, but one can help anyone without helping themselves first.
one cannot help anyone
One
without
cannot.
helping themselves first. I think that's what Nicholas meant. And people don't realize the damage they're doing because they are too lost themselves. Yeah, that's very true. And that's why the wisdom literatures enter and say it's important to be educated about the goal of life. Even in enlightened societies or experimental societies, we're trying to have some order, for instance, in the idea of democracy. You're supposed to educate everybody. The idea is, there's supposed to be schools universally available to everybody so they can understand what's right and what's wrong and so forth and know how to interact properly. Otherwise, people do themselves damned. There's a bumper sticker that says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And yeah, just very much to the point, Nicholas, a lot of people want to help others, but they do so by force, but they can't help anyone without helping themselves. It's so true. Oh, look, we're getting more, huh? No, that's just reactions. You got a rose there from somebody. Okay, so I promised you a story, so here it comes.
Uh, I
Oh,
have,
yes, Vibhav,
yeah,
Vaibhav.
yeah. Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice. So I have like one thing, one self-realization on like controlling your senses. So when you control your senses, say like you are bringing discipline in your own self. So that brings like a discipline in your entire day-to-day life schedule. And when you are like a discipline, it automatically brings like a different vibes and aura to you, and people get like inspired by the disciplined peoples. So that's like a one self-realization which I have been observed like
Oh, I like the way you put things, Vaibhav.
yeah,
I mean, just by hearing you say that, it makes me want to control my senses. Thank you.
yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, story break. You ready? So I'm going to tell you the story. Once upon a time, the king met a sage. And the king lives around those who always agree with him, say, yes, sire, you're correct. And it's possible to have a sense of always being right and then wanting to have everybody agree with you and condescend. So he had a tinge of that even when he met the sage. So the king, upon meeting the sage, there in a place that seems a little desolate, there weren't other people there, said, "Who are you?" to the sage. And when the sage detected that sense of ego in the king, to impart wisdom to him, he replied something that seemed unusual, because he was a sage, maybe antithetical to being a king, and he said, "I am a king." Surprising, right? The sage saying, "I'm a king." So let's see what happens. The king gave a rejoinder. The king said, You're a king? Where are your armies? Because any self-respecting king has to have armies to protect his kingdom and to hold on to all the wealth and so forth. And the sage replied, I don't need armies because I have no enemies. And this comes up in the Srimad Bhagavatam in a famous verse that says the qualities of an enlightened person are that he or she is tolerant and that ajatra shatva, they don't have any enemies because the main enemies are our own mind and senses. In fact, there's a boy saint from the Bhagavatam named Prahlad, and he says in his teachings to his schoolmates that there's no real enemies in this world except the ones within ourselves. That is, the unruly mind and senses are our only enemies. But because the sage had controlled his senses, he didn't have any enemies on the outside. He had no vested interest in the world also, so he had no enemies. And this is true of somebody who moves in the world and has respect for others. So what do you think the king said next? Well, I'm going to tell you. He asked, oh, where's your kingdom? And the sage replied, because I'm absorbed in spiritual practice, my kingdom is within my own heart. And this brings up a point from the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna mentions, where he says that Atman yevatmana tushta, that when somebody becomes aware of their inner workings, as we did through our meditation in the beginning, there's a sense of very deep satisfaction and abundance that comes from just knowing that we are never vanquished. Something Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, the consciousness is never killed. It's not like the body. The body can be cut, body can be drowned. It's a extremely delicate and tenuous machine. But the consciousness that illuminates the body is never vanquished. It just moves itself from one situation and goes to another, but it never dies. And so there's an abundance, and one of the parallels to a kingdom is you have this sense of a domain where you're safe and you have power. But our real power and real sense of safety comes from knowing that we're not the body, that we're something superior to the body. So the king was intrigued and he wanted to ask more because the trappings of a king means wealth. So he asks, so where's your treasury? Right? Every self-respecting king has a treasury. And the sage said, the wealthiest person is not the one who has the most gold. Rather, it's the person who needs the least from this world. There's a way in which we don't need that much to be happy. But we have this Atman Tushta, the sense of satisfaction within. What do we need? We need some simple things. And I'm not to say that everyone's should renounce whatever trappings of comfort they have in life. That's not what the Bhagavad Gita recommends. But it's, even if you live with some material facility, you're not attached to it. You only see that it's there to engage in for a higher purpose. When we become enamored of material wealth, which is folly because we can't take it with us. We come into the world with nothing, we leave with nothing. And when we try to carry it around with us in this world, just weighs us down, really. But if there's a sense of whatever we have by momentum from our previous activities, previous lifetimes called karma, whatever we get, we can utilize that for a higher purpose. And there's a sense of satisfaction. So that's real wealth. Because it's well known that too much is not enough on the material level. You get something that you've been pining for. If you've ever had a situation where you've wanted something and then you got it and it's not enough, there's something better. It never ends, says the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says this is the nature of rajas, that as soon as you get something, you want something more. You're unsettled. So who is it that's the wealthiest in this world? It's the person who has a sense of satisfaction already. I'm okay. Whatever I have right now, I'm fine. I don't need more. King pursued further. He thought, well, a king should have some land to conquer. After all, kings try to reach out and they want more territory. They want more land. They want more strategic positions in the world so they can protect their wealth and so forth. So the king said to the sage, he said, well, if you're a king, what are you trying to conquer? And the sage says, my mission is to conquer my mind and senses. And if someone takes this up as their mainstay in life, that how to control speech, how to control the belly, how to control the mind, that person has conquered the greatest enemy that nobody conquers. We see with Antony and Cleopatra, it's legion how many stories there are about those who had kingdoms, they were great leaders, and they were conquered in other ways, pulled away by their senses. So real kingship in this world, pritivim nasishyat, as I mentioned in the first part of this discussion, Rupa Goswami says to be the controller of one's senses, to know what real wealth is, that it comes from within. Everyone else becomes a subject. That's a real king of this world. And there's a famous verse written thousands of years ago about a person's mindset changing and saying that I had never realized that I was being ruled by my senses. And he says, all my senses are bad masters. They've demanded from me. They never gave me time off. And they never gave me anything valuable in return. He said, no more. That's it. I'm turning my attention to a higher cause in life. And that is service to the divine. And I'm not going to be swayed by my senses. I'm going to use my senses for a higher purpose, not for my own satisfaction. This short interlude with the king changed the mind with the sage, changed the mind of the king. And guess what he said back to the sage? You're the real king. He felt so moved by the answers of the sage and his obvious realization of what he said, and the peaceful countenance that he had, that the king said to the sage, you are the real king. And so a couple lessons. One is the quality of our leadership starts with controlling our senses. And the sense-controlled person who has integrity is best fit to lead. And yeah, I've heard from some here in Silicon Valley who have met with the leaders of their corporations, that someone was telling me the other day, they had a town hall meeting and one of the CEO was there from the company, was talking about these very same principles, saying that generosity, kindness, these are the real capital. If we just focus on trying to get ahead for the bottom line in an organization, in a corporation, we'll never be satisfied. And there's no end to it. A person that I know here who comes regularly here to Silicon Valley to teach seminars to wealthy people talks about how just in the structure of companies, those companies in which the founders start with the principle of giving away much of what they earn to a higher cause, do better than those who just are concerned with the bottom line. That's a kind of mind control, because that mean controlling one's mind, because the idea of wealth, it never ends. As much as you get, you always want more. It's a principle. You can add as many zeros as you want, even if you're in the billions and somebody thinks, well, that's not enough. It's never enough. And so having a principle in life that I'm doing some service with what I get. This is one of the principles of the Bhagavad Gita. And if somebody's managing a corporation, for instance, or starting a small business or doing anything, and they think in terms of how can I do good for others? That's leadership. And if we think in terms of controlling our own senses so that we can lead others on the right path, that can become legendary. Those in the world who have done that, even if they're in a seemingly insignificant situation at the time, have become noteworthy and praiseworthy. So it all starts with these principles of leadership. First, lead yourself. And it's an exciting project because there's plenty of work to do. There's always some sense of the daunting task of controlling the mind and the senses. And how about all of you? Do you feel satisfied when you're able to do what you plan to do? Like you have a plan and you're able to overcome the mind that wants something that's substandard, but you follow the higher path. And you, even in a simple instance where you overcome, don't you feel empowered? And what if somebody sees that, oh, okay, you didn't take more? You might be sitting at a table eating with people, and it's like, okay, you could have taken a whole nother slice of pie with whipped cream on top, even though they know you're on a diet, and then you just don't do it, and everyone goes like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't either. I mean, leadership pervades everything. We have influence on everyone, and it's what we do that makes the difference. So now let's take a few more comments. I see Charles is contributing mightily here.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Charles, you can speak for yourself, but he likes your story. He thinks it's a great story. And for the recent one, he says it makes me stand up a little bit straighter.
Oh, I like that phrase. I'm going to do it too. Just you doing it made me stand up, sit up a little straighter. Yeah, thanks, Charles. I like the story too. I heard it recently and I embellished it a little bit, but I found it to be didactic and the juxtaposition of a sage and a king. Who's the real king? And there's a story about it in the Srimad Bhagavatam about a king named Muchukunda, who says that I'm not really a king because I can't control my senses. And he talks about those who are sense controlled. They're the real kings of the world. Let's hear what else, Pavani.
Yeah, C. Solano says overcoming the mind to achieve as planned turned out to be harder as I turned older.
What do you think it is about getting older that makes it harder to control the mind? If you can comment either in the chat or you can just say it, that would be helpful.
Yeah. While you type that, Jayanti likes the story. She finds it super empowering. And Elaine says one should always reconsider who they are letting influence them as part of controlling their own mind.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, Jayanti, I'm glad you like the story. And Elaine, great advice. So much of the way we are comes from who we associate with. And that's one of the other pieces of advice that comes from the same book I quoted from in the beginning. And look, Manu has her hand up.
Yeah, Manu, go ahead. I see there's a big crowd there doing
There's a
something.
party going on there. Let's hear what's happening at the party.
Is
Somebody
it
put their hand up and we don't know who.
Prasanna? Are you trying to talk there, Manu?
I think we just want to say hi and thank you for the amazing session.
You're cooking something.
The packing books, I think.
Oh, packing books. Okay.
We are just
Distributing
packing
books.
some spiritual books in the corporate setting.
Well, where are we gonna? I want one. Thank you. Thanks for checking in. It's great to see you all at work there.
Yeah, thank you, Manu. Brought back some life here in this room. And C. Solano replies, actually, he was talking about, he or she, I don't know, was talking about um, the mind is harder as we go on over the years, and they're saying that probably more stuff piled over the years.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita how the mind is a repository of many kinds of thoughts. And when they get piled one on top of another, then there's a cacophony of sound coming from our own minds. And it does take a little bit of work. But it can be done, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah. And Nicholas is adding many years of letting the mind go, the more the mind is used to controlling you.
That's right. We get in a rut. Nirali gave some reflection. I did this. I did the same, realizing who knows the future. I can get diabetes or something and need to eat a bit of sweet before I get older, more next year. Raleigh, what did you mean? You got to explain yourself because I couldn't understand that.
Yeah, I was talking about how he said as we get older, it's hard to control the senses. So in regard to that, it's like next year, who knows, right? Let me eat sweet before I get older, in case I have less to eat as a medical reason or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I read a little piece about it was a story about a student who approached Socrates and says, like, how can I break out of my rut? There's something I want to attain, but I haven't been able to do it. And Socrates, he said, what's the secret? And I don't know if this is apocryphal or it's attributed to Socrates. I haven't researched it far enough, but be that as it may, they go for a walk and Socrates leads them into a stream. And when they get into the stream, Socrates pushes the student down under his head under the water until bubbles are coming up. And then when he finally lets up the student's head and said, what did you want? What were you meditating on? He said, air. He said, when your desire becomes as strong as it was when your head was underwater, that's when you'll attain whatever you want. So it's a matter of, like Weight Watchers, they used to have this huge sign. I drive by and I could see it in their showroom. It says, you gotta wanna. And when you come to the point, either because you've suffered too much or you said enough's enough and you say, I gotta wanna, then you can sign up for the program to control your senses.
Yeah.
Okay, a few more, Pavani, and we got
Yeah,
2 minutes.
yeah, we have one reflection, one more question. Raji says, I feel due to unfulfilled desires over the course of time, it can get harder to control the mind.
Yep, but never impossible, right?
Yeah. And then Arvind and Meenal asking, I would like to know ways in which I can observe my mind in order to learn to control it.
In the beginning meditation, if you weren't here for that, you can go back and watch it on Facebook or wherever we publish it. As I walked us through a short meditation, which is something that I retrieved from, gleaned from one of Prabhupada's purports, where he talks about objectifying the body and noticing how you're different from it. And it's not very difficult. It's a matter of introspection. And if you practice it a little bit every day, you'll start to notice that you can step back from your mind and observe it because you are the observer. And if you can observe something, you're not it. In other words, if you can look at your hand and objectify it, then you're not your hand. Same thing with your mind. Denise said, I didn't realize these recordings were posted. I would love to be able to go back and watch some I've missed. Where are they posted? Can somebody give a link to Fan the Spark or wherever it is?
Yeah, we will share with you. They are on YouTube as well as the Facebook. So we'll send an email and you all can get those. So
Yeah,
you
it kind
can.
of goes to my philosophy. If it's worth speaking, it's worth broadcasting. So we definitely have it all in archives. It's also on the website, fanthespark.com. There's links and things like that there.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, look at that. With 1 o'clock exactly. Thank you very much for joining. And I think we need something ceremonial to say goodbye because it was such an intense session. I know from observing the yogis high in the Himalayas that they have this ritual that when they see one another on the high peaks of the Himalayas, that they like to encourage one another with a phrase, and it goes Hari Bol. It means keep the transcendental vibration going, keep saying Hari, and they put their arms way up in the air. You want to try it before we go? Okay, Nirali's doing it, I'll do it. Hari Bol!
Haribol.
Bol,
Everybody,
Haribol,
see you soon.
Haribol. Thank
Happy
you.
book
Thank
packing there,
you.
and have a great
Thank you.
day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.